The royal court did not scream when they buried Elara alive. That was what haunted King Kaelin. Later, not the silver chains wrapped around her wrists, not the blood dripping from her fingertips onto the ancient floor, not even the way the stone chamber closed over her body, like a grave swallowing its dead. It was the silence. Hundreds of nobles stood beneath candlelit arches and watched an innocent girl disappear beneath the castle without a single voice rising against it. The kingdom of Ashenvale had always feared quiet women, especially the ones who listened too carefully. Elara Vey, High Counselor Vero announced, his voice echoing through the judgment hall. You stand accused of consorting with forbidden magic, corrupting the sacred halls of the crown, and poisoning the spirit of the kingdom itself. Elara stood alone in the center of the chamber wearing a plain gray servant's dress, stained with ash and rainwater. Her wrists were bound behind her back with silver moon chains forged to suppress wolf magic. Every servant in Ashenvale knew those chains. Most never saw them twice. Above her, nobles watched from black marble balconies. Priests of the Moon Temple lined the walls holding pale blue lanterns that smelled of sacred oil and cold smoke. Snow thundered against the stained glass windows. The storm outside felt alive tonight, angry. At the center of the throne platform sat King Kaelin. The Alpha King wore black iron armor instead of royal silks, as if he had walked directly from war into judgment. His dark hair fell loose against his shoulders. Silver scars marked the skin near his throat where his wolf form had once been wounded in battle, but it was his eyes people feared. Most cold gold, sharp as blades. The eyes of a ruler who had buried entire rival packs beneath frozen rivers. Yet tonight, those eyes were fixed only on Elara, not with hatred, with uncertainty. You may speak before sentence is carried out, Vero said. Elara lifted her head slowly. Her face was pale from exhaustion, though not from fear. Fear had lived inside her too long to show itself now. She looked at the king, not the council, not the priests. Him. The castle is awake, she said softly. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Vero's expression hardened instantly. You hear it again, then? Elara ignored him. Her gaze never left Kaelin. It has been trying to warn you. The king's jaw tightened. Warn me of what? The torches flickered. For one impossible second, the entire hall trembled beneath their feet. Goblets rattled across noble tables. Dust fell from the ceiling beams. Somewhere deep below the throne room, something groaned like a sleeping beast turning in its chains. The court fell silent. Elara swallowed hard. You are not the sickness killing this kingdom. Vero stepped forward sharply. Enough. The counselor's voice cracked like a whip through the chamber. He turned toward the throne with perfectly measured outrage. Your Majesty, this is precisely why she cannot be allowed to live. The girl spreads poison and madness among the servants. The guards whisper that the walls speak when she walks past. The hounds refuse to approach her chambers. Last night, the western corridor bled from the stone. Several nobles made protective signs against dark magic, but Kaelin still did not look away from Elara. You deny these accusations? He asked quietly. Elara hesitated. That hesitation sealed her fate, because the truth was impossible to explain. She had heard the castle whisper since childhood. She heard it in the walls when storms approached, in the floors when blood was spilled unfairly, in the old roots beneath Ashenvale, where ancient stone remembered things men tried to erase. The castle breathed. It mourned. Sometimes, in the deepest hours of night, it even sang. And lately, it had been screaming, Elara. The king's voice lowered. Answer me. She looked at him carefully, and for the first time since entering the hall, her composure cracked. Not from terror, from grief. You already know the truth, she whispered. The room froze. Vero's face darkened instantly. Insolent. Enough. Kaelin rose from the throne. The entire court stiffened at once. His wolf power rolled through the chamber like pressure before lightning. Even nobles lowered their eyes instinctively. The Alpha King descended the black stone steps slowly, until he stood directly before Elara. Up close, he looked less like a ruler and more like a man held together by sheer violence. Shadows lived beneath his eyes. His scent carried blood, winter smoke, and exhaustion. Elara felt the castle tremble beneath her bare feet. It always reacted to him, not with hatred, with sorrow. Kaelin studied her face in silence. "Tell me what you are." Her throat tightened painfully. "I am oath-bound to this castle." "That is not what I asked." A pulse of silver light suddenly flashed beneath the cracks in the floor. Several nobles gasped. Priests backed away from the walls. The castle was listening. Elara's eyes burned with panic now. Not for herself, for him. "If you bury me," she whispered, "Ashenvale will never forgive you." The hall erupted into furious shouting. "Witch! She threatens the crown. Seal her now." Vero seized the moment immediately. "You see it yourself, Your Majesty. The girl speaks like the old bloodline." At those words, silence crashed down again. The old bloodline. Even speaking those words aloud bordered on treason. Long before the first Alpha Kings ruled Ashenvale, the kingdom had belonged to queens tied to the living spirit of the land itself. Women who could command wolves without force. Women the castle answered to. But those queens had vanished centuries ago, during the War of Hollow Teeth. Their temples were destroyed, their bloodline erased, or so history claimed. Vero lowered his voice carefully. "The kingdom cannot survive another moon, cursed ruler." Kaelin's expression became unreadable. Elara realized then that the council had already won, not because Kaelin believed them completely, but because he was afraid. And kings who ruled frightened kingdoms did dangerous things when given impossible choices. Outside, thunder shook the mountains. The torches extinguished all at once. Darkness swallowed the whole. Then the walls whispered her name. Elara. The voice moved through the stone, like breath through lungs. Ancient, female, vast enough to make every wolf in the chamber whine in terror. Nobles screamed. Priests dropped their lanterns. Guards stumbled backward. Kaelin's wolf exploded beneath his skin so violently that his eyes flashed gold. Claws ripped briefly through his fingertips before he forced control back into his body. The walls whispered again. "She belongs to the throne beneath the throne." Vero shouted over the chaos. "Seal her now." Moonchains tightened around Elara's wrists. She cried out softly as silver burned her skin. The castle roared beneath them. Cracks spread across the floor, and for one horrifying moment, Elara saw something impossible behind Kaelin's eyes. Not hatred, not fear, recognition, as if some part of him already knew her. Then he spoke the sentence that shattered her heart. "Carry out the judgment." The guards dragged her toward the lower chamber beneath the throne room, while the court watched in horror and fascination. Elara did not fight. She could feel the castle shaking around her now. Dust rained from the ceiling. Ancient roots groaned somewhere far below. The kingdom was awake, and it was afraid. The burial chamber lay beneath Ashenvale itself, older than the throne above it. No torches burned there. The walls were carved from black stone veined with silver that pulsed faintly like sleeping veins. The guards forced Elara to her knees inside a circular pit. One whispered a prayer before stepping back. Even they feared this place. Vero appeared above the edge of the chamber, robes fluttering in the cold air rising from below. "You should have stayed silent," he said quietly. Elara looked up at him. "You know what this castle is. I know what power does to kingdoms. You stole the throne from her bloodline." For the first time, genuine fear flickered across his face. Then it vanished. The dead should remain buried. Heavy chains rattled overhead. The stone platform above her began sliding shut. Darkness slowly swallowed the circle of gray sky overhead. And just before the chamber closed completely, Elara saw King Kaelin standing at the edge of the pit, watching. Their eyes met one final time. She expected cruelty, satisfaction, indifference. Instead, she saw conflict, tearing him apart from within. as if he wanted to stop this, as if something inside him was begging him to. But the stone sealed shut between them before either could speak. Darkness consumed her completely. Then the castle breathed. Warmth spread suddenly through the black stone beneath her body. Silver light pulsed through the walls like a heartbeat. Ancient whispers flooded the chamber from every direction at once. Not angry. Mourning. Elara pressed trembling fingers against the floor. And deep beneath Ashenvale Castle, something ancient awakened for the first time in centuries. Far above her, in the throne room of the Alpha King, the stone beneath the royal throne cracked open, and the walls began whispering her name. The first servant vanished before dawn. No blood, no screams, no signs of struggle. One moment the old corridor guard named Brenner was standing outside the Western Archives complaining about the cold, and the next only his lantern remained behind, swinging slowly from a hook in the stone wall, while the corridor whispered with a woman's voice. Downstairs. The word drifted through the darkness like breath against skin. By sunrise, panic had spread across Ashenvale Castle. Servants refused to walk the lower halls alone. Wolves snarled at empty corners. The royal hounds scratched frantically at the floors near the throne chamber until their paws bled. Every torch lit near the burial vault extinguished itself within minutes, and beneath it all, the castle kept whispering, Elara, Elara, Elara. King Cailan had not slept since the judgment. He stood alone in the war chamber overlooking the frozen cliffs of Ashenvale, while snow devoured the mountains beyond the glass. His hands rested against the stone table carved with ancient battle maps, though his mind no longer saw borders or armies. It saw gray eyes staring up at him from the burial pit, calm even at the end, calm enough to frighten him more than any scream could have. You already know the truth. The words had followed him through the night, like a curse. A low growl rose in his chest unexpectedly. Pain ripped through his ribs so sharply he nearly lost balance. He gripped the edge of the table hard enough to crack the stone beneath his claws. His wolf was getting worse. Every transformation now felt like forcing broken bones through flesh. His senses flickered unpredictably. Hunger came in violent waves. Sleep brought nightmares filled with silver roots strangling his throat beneath the castle floor. And since Elara's burial, the kingdom itself felt wrong. Too quiet, like a forest, moments before lightning struck. A knock interrupted the silence. Enter. The doors opened immediately. High Counselor Vero stepped inside wearing deep crimson robes lined with winter fur, calm as ever, controlled as ever. Only the tightness near his mouth betrayed strain. The eastern watchtower collapsed an hour ago, Vero said. No explanation. The stone simply gave way. Cailan said nothing. The servants claimed they heard her voice before it happened. Still silence. Vero studied him carefully. Your Majesty, this cannot continue. The king finally turned. What exactly do you think is happening here? Vero's gaze sharpened slightly. Forbidden blood awakens beneath the castle. Surely you understand that. No. Cailan's voice darkened. I understand fear. I understand politics. I understand men inventing monsters when power begins slipping from their hands. The counselor stiffened, almost imperceptibly. You doubt the judgment? Cailan stepped closer slowly. Every instinct inside Vero screamed caution, though he hid it well. The Alpha King in battle was terrifying, but the Alpha King uncertain was far worse. She heard the walls, Cailan said quietly, and the walls answered her. Dark magic often mimics divinity. Then explain why my wolves refused the throne room. Vero hesitated. That hesitation was enough. Cailan's eyes narrowed. You know more than you admit, Your Majesty, Vero said carefully. There are truths buried for good reason. The old queens nearly destroyed this kingdom. According to histories written by your ancestors, the air between them sharpened instantly. Vero lowered his voice. Do not let one servant girl poison your judgment. Something dangerous flashed across Cailan's face then. Not love, not affection, possession. The primitive wolf instinct to protect what had been marked by his attention. It startled him as much as it frightened Vero. She is dead, the counselor pressed. Let the grave keep her. At that exact moment, a violent crack echoed through the chamber walls. Both men turned sharply. Silver light spilled suddenly through the seams between the stones. Ancient runes blazed alive beneath the floor, glowing brighter with each heartbeat. Then the walls whispered, "She still breathes." Vero staggered backward in horror, but Kalen froze completely, because beneath the whisper, beneath the trembling stone and silver light, he heard something else. A heartbeat, deep below the castle. Slow, weak, alive. The king moved instantly. He stormed from the war chamber with guards struggling to follow behind him. Corridors shook as he descended toward the sealed burial vault beneath Ashenvale. Servants fled from his path. Torches flickered violently, as though the castle itself recognized where he was going. The lower halls grew colder the deeper he descended. Ancient symbols carved into the stone walls glimmered faintly silver beneath layers of dust. No king had walked these tunnels in generations, perhaps longer. By the time Kalen reached the burial chamber doors, the air tasted of rain and old blood. 4 royal guards stood outside the sealed entrance, pale with terror. "Open it," Kalen ordered. The men exchanged frightened looks. "Your Majesty," one whispered. "We hear voices inside." "Open it." Heavy locks groaned. Iron chains rattled across the stone. The ancient doors slowly pulled apart with a sound like bones dragging across earth. Darkness breathed out from within. The chamber beyond was no longer empty. Silver roots covered the walls now, pulsing faintly beneath the stone like veins beneath skin. Ancient symbols glowed across the floor in widening circles around the burial pit. The air itself hummed with power, old enough to make wolves kneel instinctively. And at the center of it all lay Elara, alive. She rested against the black stone floor, unconscious. Silver roots curled protectively around her body like living arms. The moon chains binding her wrists had shattered into pieces. Her skin glowed faintly beneath the darkness, pale silver light moving beneath it with every breath she took. The guards recoiled immediately. Kalen stepped forward slowly. His wolf surged violently inside him at the sight of her. Not rage, not hunger, recognition. Mine. The instinct hit him so hard it nearly stopped his heart. Impossible. Elara stirred weakly at the sound of approaching footsteps. Her lashes trembled before silver-gray eyes opened slowly into the darkness. For one disoriented moment, she simply stared at him. Then pain crossed her face. "You shouldn't have come here," she whispered hoarsely. Kalen crouched before her carefully. "You survived." A faint smile touched her lips. Sad, exhausted. "The castle would not let me die." Behind him, one of the guards suddenly gasped. The silver roots along the walls were moving, not toward Elara, toward the king. They crept slowly across the stone floor, like living veins, surrounding Kalen's boots without touching him, watching him, judging him. Elara saw his expression change. "It knows your blood," she said softly. "What does that mean?" Her eyes lowered briefly. "You are not the first king to sit that throne." The chamber trembled violently. Dust exploded from the ceiling above. Somewhere far overhead, bells began ringing throughout Ashenvale Castle. Alarm bells. Panic spread through distant corridors. Then came screams. One of the guards ran toward the entrance tunnel. "Your Majesty, the western wing is collapsing!" Another voice echoed from above. "The walls are splitting open." The castle was breaking apart. No. Kalen realized the truth instantly. It was waking up. Elara struggled weakly to stand, but pain nearly dropped her back to the floor. Kalen caught her automatically before she fell. The moment his hands touched her waist, silver fire exploded across the chamber walls. Every root lit up at once. The entire burial vault roared alive. And suddenly, Kalen saw it. Not with his eyes. With the bond beneath the stone. A throne hidden beneath Ashenvale. A woman crowned in moonlight, kneeling beside a giant silver wolf. Blood covering marble floors. Men in royal armor slaughtering priestesses beneath burning banners. A king, driving a sword through the heart of a queen, while council lords watched in silence. Then the queen whispered with her dying breath, "The kingdom will remember." Kaelin staggered backward violently, releasing Elara at once. Breath tore from his lungs. His wolf howled in agony inside his chest. "Elara," his voice cracked. "What was that?" Her face had gone pale with horror. "The memory beneath the throne," she whispered. Varro's voice suddenly thundered from the chamber entrance. "Step away from her." Royal soldiers flooded the tunnel behind him, carrying moonsteel spears. Priests followed close behind, chanting suppression rites beneath glowing lanterns. Varro looked at Elara with naked fury now. Not fear anymore. Desperation. "She has already infected the king," he snarled. "Kill her before the bond fully awakens." The soldiers hesitated, because the walls had begun growling. Not metaphorically. The castle itself emitted a deep animal sound through the stone, ancient and furious. Cracks spread rapidly across the chamber floor. Silver light burst through them like veins of lightning, and behind Elara, something enormous moved beneath the walls. Something alive. The priest screamed first. A giant wolf silhouette emerged beneath the stone itself, visible through the glowing walls like a spirit trapped beneath ice. Silver eyes opened slowly in the darkness. Ancient, female, terrifying. The wolf spirit looked directly at Kaelin, then bowed its head to Elara. The chamber fell dead silent. Varro's face drained of color. "No," he whispered. Elara stared at the spirit in shock. "Mother." The wolf opened its jaws, and the entire castle spoke with its voice. "The true queen has returned." No one moved after the castle spoke. The words hung inside the burial chamber like a curse carved into bone itself. The true queen has returned. Even the priests stopped breathing. The silver wolf spirit behind Elara filled the walls with its enormous shadow, ancient eyes glowing through layers of black stone like moons trapped beneath ice. King Kaelin felt his own wolf recoil violently inside him. Not from fear, submission. His beast wanted to bow. The realization struck him harder than any battlefield wound ever had. Alpha wolves did not kneel. Kings least of all. Yet every instinct beneath his skin screamed the same impossible truth. The power in this chamber was older than crowns, older than kingdoms, older than the bloodline sitting upon Ashenvale's throne, and Elara stood at the center of it. Varro recovered first. "Kill her," the counselor roared. "Now." Moonsteel spears lowered instantly. Soldiers surged forward despite their terror. The silver wolf spirit growled. The entire burial chamber exploded with force. Stone cracked apart. Priests were thrown backward into the walls. Moon lanterns shattered across the floor. The roots beneath the chamber floor burst upward in glowing silver coils, wrapping around soldiers' ankles and dragging them screaming into darkness. Chaos swallowed the vault whole. Kaelin lunged toward Elara instinctively just as part of the ceiling collapsed above her. Massive stones crashed against the floor where she had stood moments earlier. He caught her against his chest and spun them both behind one of the ancient pillars as debris rained through the chamber. The moment he touched her again, the pain inside his wolf eased. Only slightly, but enough to make his breath hitch. Elara felt it too. Her silver-gray eyes widened as she looked up at him from within the shelter of his arms. For one dangerous heartbeat, the world narrowed into warmth, breath, and the savage rhythm of two hearts trying not to recognize each other. Then another explosion shattered the moment. Varro stood near the chamber entrance holding a relic blade, glowing with moonfire. Ancient runes burned along its edge. Elara's expression changed instantly when she saw it. Horror flooded her face so suddenly Kaelin noticed at once. "What is that?" he demanded. "The blade that killed her," Elara whispered. The silver wolf spirit snarled violently behind the walls. Varro raised the weapon with shaking hands. "That creature is not your queen. It is the same corruption that nearly destroyed Ashenvale centuries ago." The castle growled again. Kaelin stepped protectively in front of Elara before realizing he had done it. Soldiers noticed. So did Varro. The counselor stared at him in disbelief. "Your Majesty, she survived the burial," Kalen said coldly. "Explain that." Vero's face hardened. "Dark magic preserves its vessels." "No." Kalen's golden eyes flashed dangerously. "You're lying." Silence crashed through the chamber. The king rarely accused his council openly. Never like this. Vero understood instantly that control was slipping. That terrified him more than the spirit wolf behind the walls. "You saw the memory," the counselor said carefully. "You know what those queens became." Kalen's jaw tightened. He had seen blood, betrayal, a murdered queen. But memories were dangerous things, incomplete things. The vision beneath the throne had shown him death without context, truth without explanation. And yet, when he looked at Elara, he did not see corruption. He saw exhaustion, fear, grief. A girl who had spent her life carrying the weight of a kingdom that treated her as invisible. Then the silver roots suddenly spread across the floor toward him again. This time they did not stop at his boots. They climbed slowly around his legs like living chains, not harming him, pulling him forward, toward the center of the chamber, toward the broken burial pit. Elara stiffened immediately. No, the roots ignored her. The floor beneath the throne vault cracked wider and wider until an enormous symbol appeared beneath layers of shattered stone, a silver wolf, surrounded by a crown of roots. Ancient, royal, alive. The wolf spirit lowered its massive head, and Kalen heard a voice inside his mind. Not Elara's. The queen from the memory. "You carry stolen blood." Pain exploded through his chest. Kalen dropped to one knee with a strangled growl. His wolf thrashed violently beneath his skin. Black veins spread briefly along his throat before disappearing again. The soldiers backed away in fear. Even Vero looked shaken now. Elara moved instantly toward the king despite the danger. "Don't fight it," she said urgently. Kalen grabbed her wrist hard. "What is happening to me?" Her eyes filled with conflict. Because she knew, or at least part of it. "The kingdom is rejecting your line," she whispered. "Your wolf is dying because the throne no longer belongs to your blood." The words hit the chamber like a blade through flesh. Several soldiers made horrified signs against treason. Vero's face twisted with fury. "She infects him with lies." Elara ignored him. Her gaze stayed locked on Kalen's. "The castle chose rulers once. Not councils, not wars. The land itself chose them. And you?" Kalen asked hoarsely. "What are you?" Before she could answer, screams echoed from above. Not one scream. Hundreds. The entire castle shook violently. A guard stumbled into the chamber entrance, covered in blood and dust. "Your Majesty," he gasped. The northern tower collapsed. "Wolves are attacking their handlers. The entire palace is in chaos." Another crash thundered overhead. Then came the howls. Every wolf in Ashenvale had begun crying at once. The sound filled the castle like morning bells. Elara closed her eyes painfully. "It's spreading." Kalen rose unsteadily to his feet. "What's spreading?" "The death beneath the throne." Vero stepped forward sharply. "Do not listen to her. She's the only one giving answers." Kalen snapped. The counselor's mask cracked for the first time. Rage flashed openly through his eyes. "Answers?" he hissed. "This girl is the reason the kingdom is collapsing." "No," Elara whispered. Everyone looked at her. Silver light slowly spread beneath her skin now, faint veins of moonlight glowing along her throat and wrists. The castle roots curled protectively around her feet. Her voice trembled. "The kingdom was already dying before I was born." Silence. Then she looked directly at Vero. "Because your families murdered the queens." The chamber erupted instantly. Soldiers shouted. Priests cried out in outrage. Vero's face became deathly pale beneath his fury. Kalen stared at the counselor slowly. And suddenly, dozens of moments over the past years rearranged themselves inside his mind. The sealed archives, the forbidden lower halls, the council's obsession with destroying old records. The strange sickness affecting royal bloodlines, generation after generation. Not a curse from outside the kingdom. Something buried inside it. Varro realized the king understood. That realization made him desperate. "Seize her," he ordered the guards. "The king is compromised." No one moved. Not because they refused. Because the walls had begun bleeding silver light. Cracks spread across every surface of the burial vault. The giant wolf spirit emerged farther from the stone now, its massive form becoming clearer with each pulse of light. Ancient scars covered its spectral body, chains wrapped around its throat. Elara stared at the chains in horror. "They bound her," she whispered. Then she saw the blade in Varro's hand again. Recognition hit her fully at last. That sword. Her breath caught painfully. "Your family kept it." Varro's expression darkened. "Some weapons are too dangerous to destroy." "No," Elara said softly. "You kept it because you were afraid she would wake again." The silver wolf spirit suddenly turned its enormous gaze toward Varro, and for the first time since appearing, it showed its teeth. The counselor stumbled backward. Real fear flooded his face now. Ancient, primal fear. "Protect me," he shouted at the guards. But the guards themselves were retreating. Because the spirit wolf was no longer the only thing emerging from the walls. Shapes moved beneath the glowing stone now. More wolves. Dozens of them. Spectral silver beasts pacing beneath Ashenvale Castle, like an army buried alive beneath the kingdom. Their eyes opened one by one, inside the walls around the chamber. Watching. Waiting. The dead queen's wolves. Kalen felt the air leave his lungs. The kingdom had not forgotten its rulers. It had imprisoned them. Elara turned toward him slowly. Tears shimmered in her eyes, though not for herself. "For centuries," she whispered. "They've been trapped beneath the throne." Then the castle gave a sound, unlike anything Kalen had ever heard before. A heartbeat, one massive pulse shaking every stone in Ashenvale. The roots exploded upward across the chamber floor, and the throne above them cracked in half. When the throne split apart above them, the sound echoed through Ashenvale like the cracking of the world itself. Every noble in the upper court screamed. Black marble shattered across the throne room floor, while silver roots burst upward from beneath the ancient stone, like veins finally breaking through dead flesh. Chandeliers crashed from the ceiling. Sacred banners caught fire and silver flame. The giant wolf carved behind the throne opened glowing eyes for the first time in centuries, and throughout the kingdom wolves dropped to their knees. In the burial chamber below, King Kalen felt the pulse hit his body like a war drum. The dying weakness inside his wolf recoiled violently, as if something ancient had finally awakened and recognized him, not as king, as intruder. The spirit wolves pacing beneath the walls began howling together. The sound shook dust from the ceiling. Elara pressed trembling fingers against her chest as silver light spread farther beneath her skin. She looked terrified now, not empowered. That frightened Kalen more than the magic itself. "What's happening?" he demanded. She swallowed hard. "The castle is choosing." Choosing what? Her eyes lifted slowly toward the shattered ceiling far above them. "Whether this kingdom deserves to survive." The chamber fell silent. Even Varro stopped breathing for a moment. Then rage twisted his face. "Enough." The counselor raised the relic blade high above his head. Moonfire exploded along its edge, flooding the burial chamber with pale blue light. Ancient runes awakened across the weapon, bright enough to burn the eyes. Every spirit wolf in the walls snarled at once. Elara stepped backward instinctively. Fear flashed openly across her face for the first time since her burial. Kalen noticed immediately. "What does that blade do?" Varro answered before she could. "It kills queens." Then he lunged straight toward her. Kalen moved without thinking. Steel screamed against steel as the king intercepted the strike with his own sword. Moonfire burst violently between the blades. The impact shook the chamber floor. Varro stared at him in disbelief. "You would defend her?" Kalen's golden eyes burned. "You drew a weapon in my presence." She is not human anymore. The king glanced back once at Elara. Silver light curled around her wrists like living smoke now. The roots beneath the chamber floor moved toward her gently, protectively, as though the castle itself recognized her pain. No, she was not entirely human anymore, but neither was he, and for the first time in years, his wolf was no longer screaming in agony. Varro attacked again, faster this time. Moonfire slashed toward Elara's throat. Kaelin blocked it with brutal force, driving the counselor backward across the chamber. Their blades collided again and again, sparks exploding through the darkness. Soldiers scattered out of the way while priests screamed prayers at the walls. The king fought like a beast cornered. Varro fought like a man terrified of losing history itself. "You don't understand what she is," the counselor shouted. "No," Kaelin growled, forcing him back another step. "I understand that you buried an innocent woman alive." "Innocent?" Varro's face twisted with fury. "Her bloodline nearly destroyed this realm. Then why does the castle obey her?" Varro hesitated. That heartbeat of hesitation nearly killed him. Kaelin slammed him against one of the stone pillars hard enough to crack marble. The relic blade fell from Varro's hand and skidded across the chamber floor toward Elara. The moment her fingers touched the weapon, the entire burial vault exploded with silver light. Everyone froze. The blade began screaming, not metaphorically. A horrible sound poured from the moonfire steel as ancient memories flooded the chamber. Blood-soaked marble, women burning alive beneath sacred banners, wolves chained beneath the earth, kings kneeling before council lords while crowns dripped red across stone floors. Elara gasped and nearly dropped the sword. "It remembers," she whispered. Then another voice echoed through the chamber. Female, cold, ancient, daughter. The spirit wolf behind the walls stepped fully into the burial chamber at last. The stone itself parted for her enormous silver body. She towered over everyone in the vault, spectral fur glowing like moonlight across snow. Chains still wrapped around her throat and legs, forged from black iron and ancient runes. Wounds covered her body beneath the silver glow. Old execution wounds. The dead queen's wolf. The true ruler of Ashenvale. Every guard dropped to one knee instantly from sheer instinct. Some wept openly. Others shook so badly they could barely breathe. Kaelin stood frozen, not because he feared the creature, because somewhere deep inside himself, his wolf recognized her scent. Blood, moonlight, home. The spirit wolf approached Elara slowly. The girl trembled, but did not retreat. Tears burned down her face as the enormous beast lowered its scarred head toward her. When the wolf spoke again, the voice came from the walls, the roots, the stone itself. "You carry my heart." Elara's breath caught painfully. "Who are you?" The wolf's glowing eyes softened. "I was Queen Liriana of Ashenvale." Silence consumed the chamber. Even Varro looked horrified, hearing the forbidden name spoken aloud. Queen Liriana, the last Moon Queen, the woman erased from every royal archive, the ruler history called mad, cursed, dangerous. The queen murdered during the fall of the old bloodline. Elara stared at the spirit in disbelief. "Why can I hear the castle?" "Because you were born from it." The silver roots suddenly surged across the chamber walls, revealing hidden carvings beneath centuries of stone. Ancient murals appeared all around them. Queens standing beside enormous wolves, roots woven around crowns, kings kneeling before women touched by moonlight. The true history of Ashenvale, not conquest. Bont. The land had once chosen rulers through blood, tied directly to the spirit beneath the kingdom itself. The Moon Queens were not tyrants. They were guardians. The castle lived because they lived. The wolves prospered because their blood kept balance between crown and land. Then the councils betrayed them. Kaelin saw it clearly now, through the murals flashing alive around him. Noble families feared queens they could not control, so they poisoned kings against them. They spread fear about forbidden magic. They started wars, and when the last queen fell, they chained her wolf beneath the castle rather than destroy it completely. But the kingdom never healed afterward. Because they had ripped out its heart. Varro staggered backward slowly. Lies. Queen Liriana turned her enormous gaze toward him. You know they are not lies. The counselor's composure shattered. Your kind enslaved kings. No, the queen replied. We stopped men like you from poisoning kingdoms for power. The roots suddenly lashed upward around Varro's ankles. He screamed as silver thorns pierced through his robes and pinned him against the wall. Wait, Kaelin barked. The roots froze instantly. The queen looked at him carefully. For one strange moment, the burial chamber grew still. The spirit wolf studied the Alpha King in silence, while silver dust drifted through the air around them. Then her voice lowered. You are not your ancestors. Kaelin swallowed hard. Then why is my wolf dying? The queen's eyes dimmed with sorrow. Because the throne rejects stolen blood. The words struck harder now than before. Kaelin looked away briefly. Something inside him had known already. Known from the moment he first sat upon the throne and felt the castle go cold beneath him. Known every time his wolf weakened after passing the lower halls. Known every night he dreamed of silver roots strangling his crown. He had never truly belonged to Ashenvale. And somehow, Elara did. The realization terrified him more than war ever had. Because the kingdom would never accept it peacefully. As if summoned by the thought itself, horns suddenly blared from above. Soldiers. Hundreds of them. One of the guards near the tunnel entrance looked upward in horror. The nobles are fleeing the castle, he said shakily. The outer packs think the throne has fallen. Another guard rushed into the chamber moments later covered in snow and blood. Your Majesty, he shouted breathlessly. The northern alphas are gathering outside the gates. They say the kingdom has been cursed. Panic spread instantly through the vault. Varro began laughing weakly, despite the roots pinning him. Do you see now? He hissed. The moment the old blood awakens, the realm tears itself apart. No, Elara whispered softly. Everyone looked at her. Silver light surrounded her fully now, glowing beneath her skin like moonfire trapped inside veins. Yet, despite the power building around her, she looked heartbreakingly human, standing there barefoot in torn servant's clothes, exhausted, frightened, alone. The kingdom was already broken, she said. It's only finally screaming loud enough for everyone to hear. Kaelin stared at her, at the girl buried alive by his command, at the servant who still sounded more merciful than anyone in the court above them. And for the first time in many years, the Alpha King felt ashamed of his crown. Then the castle shook again, harder this time. A massive roar thundered from somewhere beneath the kingdom. Queen Liriana lifted her head sharply. Fear crossed even the ancient spirit's face. The chains are weakening, she said. Elara frowned. What chains? The queen's silver eyes turned slowly toward the darkness below the burial chamber floor. Something enormous moved beneath Ashenvale. Something alive. And then, from deep beneath the roots of the kingdom, another wolf answered the howls. Not silver. Black. The sound rising from beneath Ashenvale was not a wolf's howl. It was older, deeper, a noise filled with hunger so ancient it made the spirit wolves flatten their ears against their skulls. The burial chamber trembled violently as dust rained from the ceiling. Cracks spread through the lower walls. Somewhere far beneath them, chains groaned like ships breaking apart beneath frozen seas. Queen Liriana's silver eyes darkened with dread. No, she whispered. Kaelin looked sharply toward her. What is down there? The spirit wolf did not answer immediately. That silence alone frightened everyone in the chamber more than the roar itself. Then another impact thundered beneath the roots. Stronger this time. The floor buckled. Priests screamed. One of the soldiers stumbled backward directly into a wall, just as black claws punched through the stone where his head had been moments earlier. The chamber erupted into panic. A giant hand. Not human, not entirely. Wolf dragged itself halfway from the wall, before vanishing again into darkness beneath the stone. Thick black fur covered it. Rotting silver chains dangled from the wrist. Elara's face went white. The Hollow King, she breathed. Every spirit wolf in the chamber began growling violently. Kaylin's instincts screamed danger. "What is that?" Queen Liriana lowered her massive head slowly. "My mate." Silence crashed through the vault. Even Vero stopped struggling against the roots. The queen's voice echoed softly through the walls. "When the council slaughtered the moon queens, they feared the kings who loved us even more." Images flashed suddenly across the glowing walls again. Ancient memories bleeding through stone. A king covered in blood standing over burning temples. Wolves ripping soldiers apart beneath moonlight. A queen dying in his arms. Then the king screaming as black chains wrapped around his body, while priests carved runes into his flesh. "They broke him," Liriana whispered, "piece by piece." The visions darkened further. The king transforming into something monstrous beneath the castle roots. Years passing. Decades. Centuries. Madness replacing grief. Hunger replacing love. "They chained him beneath Ashenvale," the queen said, "to feed on the kingdom forever." Kaylin's blood ran cold. The dying sickness spreading through Ashenvale. The weakening wolves. The rotting land. Not a curse. A prisoner feeding beneath the throne. Vero suddenly laughed hoarsely. "You speak as though your kind were innocent." The queen's silver eyes turned toward him slowly. "You fed him our blood." The counselor froze. Elara looked at Vero in horror. "What?" The roots around the chamber walls pulsed violently as ancient memories spilled into the air again. This time they showed council lords dragging chained women beneath the castle. Girls with silver eyes. Servants. Prisoners. Children. Bloodlines descended from the old queens. Sacrifice. Fed to the beast beneath the throne to keep it sleeping. Kaylin's face darkened with fury so cold it became terrifying. "How long?" Vero said nothing. "How long?" the king roared. The burial chamber shook with alpha power. Several guards dropped instantly to one knee. Vero swallowed hard. "Generations." Elara staggered backward like she'd been struck. Her mother, her grandmother, the oath-bound servants, not servants, offerings. The realization hollowed something inside her chest. Suddenly, every whispered warning from old kitchen women, every vanished maid, every locked corridor beneath the castle snapped together into one horrible truth. The oath-bound bloodline had never existed to serve Ashenvale. It existed to feed the monster chained beneath it. Tears burned behind Elara's eyes, but she forced them back. Not now. If she broke now, the darkness below them would consume everything. Another roar exploded beneath the roots. The floor cracked open. Black smoke burst upward through the chamber along with the smell of blood and wet earth. The spirit wolves snarled violently as enormous claws began dragging themselves upward from the abyss beneath the burial vault. The Hollow King was waking. "Everyone out," Kaylin ordered instantly. The soldiers did not hesitate this time. Terror drove them toward the upper tunnels, while priests stumbled after them screaming prayers. Only Vero remained pinned against the wall by silver roots. The counselor looked suddenly much older than before. "You cannot stop him," he whispered. "Not once he fully wakes." Kaylin grabbed him by the throat. "You fed innocent women to that thing. We kept the kingdom alive," Vero shouted desperately. "You think the outer packs would follow rulers tied to forbidden queens? You think kingdoms survive through mercy? No," Kaylin growled. "But they die from monsters pretending to be men." He threw Vero hard against the stone floor. Elara barely noticed. Her eyes remained fixed on the widening darkness splitting the chamber apart. Something enormous was climbing toward them slowly. Every movement shook the roots of Ashenvale itself. Queen Liriana turned urgently toward her. "You must leave." Elara shook her head immediately. "No, he will know your blood." "I know." Fear flickered across the Spirit Queen's ancient eyes. "If he recognizes you." Another claw burst through the floor. Larger now, massive enough to split stone like paper. Black fur dripped with centuries of blood and darkness. The chains around the creature's wrist glowed red-hot as they strained against its strength. Kaylin moved instinctively in front of Elara again. "You said he was your mate," he said to Liriana, without taking his eyes off the growing abyss. Then why is he attacking? Pain crossed the queen's spectral face. Because I died. The chamber fell silent except for the creature climbing below them. When they murdered me, she whispered, they left him alive long enough to watch. Elara's chest tightened painfully. No wonder the beast had become monstrous. No wonder the kingdom itself had rotted afterward. Ashenvale had been built atop grief so deep it poisoned the land for centuries. Then the Hollow King finally emerged. The chamber exploded apart as the floor shattered completely beneath them. Stone pillars collapsed. Black roots erupted upward alongside a gigantic wolf-like creature covered in chains and scars. It towered over the burial vault, nearly scraping the ceiling. Black fur hung in ragged patches across twisted flesh. One eye glowed silver, the other burned red with madness. And when it opened its jaws, human screams echoed from inside its throat. Several remaining guards fled instantly. Galan drew his sword. The beast ignored him. Its gaze locked directly onto Elara. The world seemed to stop. Slowly, impossibly, the monstrous creature lowered its head toward her. Sniffing, remembering. Elara felt ancient sorrow slam into her chest so hard tears filled her eyes instantly. Not her sorrow. His. The Hollow King recognized her blood. You smell like her, the beast whispered. Its voice sounded broken, layered beneath growls and centuries of madness. Kaelin stepped protectively closer to Elara. Stay behind me. The creature's red eyes shifted toward the king. Rage exploded instantly through its enormous body. Chains snapped tighter around its limbs. A stone king. It's Nala. Kaelin's wolf surged violently beneath his skin in response. Not submission this time. Fury. Dominance. Two kings facing each other across a dying kingdom. The Hollow King lunged. Kaelin transformed mid-motion. Black fur exploded across his body as bones shifted violently beneath flesh. His enormous wolf form slammed into the creature hard enough to shake the entire chamber. Snarls and claws filled the darkness instantly. Stone shattered around them as the two beasts tore across the burial vault. Elara stumbled backward against the roots. Kaelin's wolf was huge, powerful, beautiful in a brutal way. But beside the Hollow King, he still looked young, mortal. The ancient beast overpowered him almost immediately. Black claws ripped across Kaelin's side, throwing him through one of the stone pillars. The king crashed hard against the wall with a roar of pain. Blood covered the floor instantly. Elara, Queen Liriana cried. The chains. Elara looked up sharply. The chains binding the Hollow King glowed with the same runes carved into Varro's relic blade. Moonfire restraints. Ancient execution magic. Not meant to imprison him. To keep him enraged. The realization hit her all at once. They had fed his madness deliberately. Because as long as the beast remained monstrous, the council could justify destroying the queens forever. Kaelin struggled to rise again, blood pouring from deep wounds along his shoulder. His wolf snarled, savagely despite the pain. The Hollow King advanced toward him slowly. You wear their crown, the creature growled. So you die with their throne. Kaelin bared his teeth. Then, Elara stepped between them. Stomp. Silver light exploded through the chamber. Every root beneath Ashenvale Castle awakened at once. The Hollow King froze instantly. Not because of power. Because Elara's voice sounded exactly like Liriana's. The beast stared down at her in shock. Tears slid down Elara's face as she reached trembling fingers toward the burning chains wrapped around his body. You were never the monster, she whispered. The Hollow King shuddered violently, and somewhere, deep beneath centuries of rage and madness, something inside him remembered love. The Hollow King trembled beneath Elara's touch, not with rage, with memory. Silver light spread slowly across the burning chains wrapped around his massive body. The ancient runes carved into the metal flickered violently, as if fighting against something older than the magic binding them. The beast lowered its enormous head toward her, breathing raggedly. One ruined silver eye fixed on her face with unbearable sorrow. You sound like her, he whispered again. Elara's chest ached so fiercely she could barely breathe. because she felt it now. Not just the castle, not just the roots beneath Ashenvale. Him. The grief chained inside him was so vast it felt endless. Centuries of agony rotting beneath the kingdom like poison trapped under skin. He had loved Queen Liriana enough to become a monster after losing her, and Ashenvale had fed on that grief for generations. Behind her, Calen forced himself upright despite the blood pouring from his wounds. His black wolf form flickered back into human shape unevenly, breath harsh with pain. One hand pressed against the deep claw marks across his ribs. Yet even wounded, his eyes never left Elara standing before the ancient beast. "Move away from him," he ordered hoarsely. The Hollow King growled instantly. The chamber shook. Elara turned quickly. "Don't." Calen's jaw tightened. "That thing nearly tore me apart. That thing was tortured for centuries." The king stared at her. Something dangerous lived in her expression now. Not cruelty, not vengeance, but truth sharp enough to wound anyone forced to face it. "You think monsters are born," she whispered. "Most of them are made." The words hit harder than the Hollow King's claws had, because Calen knew she was not speaking only about the beast beneath Ashenvale. She was speaking about kings, too. The castle groaned around them. Silver roots spread farther through the broken burial chamber, while spirit wolves paced along the glowing walls like restless ghosts. Above them, distant screams still echoed faintly from the upper castle as nobles fled the collapsing throne room. Ashenvale was unraveling stone by stone, and at the center of it stood a servant girl the kingdom had tried to bury alive. Varro staggered shakily to his feet near the chamber wall, staring at Elara as though she had become his worst nightmare made flesh. "You should have died," he whispered. Elara slowly looked toward him. For the first time since her burial, something cold entered her gaze. Not hatred, exhaustion. The kind born from years of swallowing pain until there was nothing left to fear. "My mother died in these tunnels, didn't she?" she asked quietly. Varro said nothing. She heard the castle too. Silence. The counselor's refusal to answer became answer enough. Elara felt something inside her finally break open. Not violently. Softly. Like ice thawing after a brutal winter. All her life, she had believed her mother simply vanished while serving the lower halls. The other servants whispered about accidents, illness, punishments, but Elara remembered the truth hidden beneath those frightened stories. Her mother had spent years listening to the walls at night, crying quietly when she thought no one noticed, begging Elara never to go beneath the throne room no matter what the castle whispered to her, because she knew what waited there. "She begged you for mercy," Elara whispered. Varro's face hardened instinctively. "She carried dangerous blood. She was a servant. She was a threat." "No," Elara said softly. "You were afraid." The silver roots exploded across the chamber walls in response to her grief. Ancient murals glowed brighter around them. More memories bled through stone servant women dragged below the castle in chains. Noble councils signing execution orders in secret. Children hidden away whenever silver eyes appeared among the lower bloodlines. The kingdom had murdered its own heart, slowly, generation after generation. Calen looked around the chamber in horror. His ancestors had known. Maybe not the full truth, but enough. Enough to let the councils continue. Enough to wear crowns bought with innocent blood. And now the throne itself was dying because of it. The Hollow King suddenly lifted his head sharply. His nostrils flared toward the tunnels above. A deep growl rumbled through his chest. "They come," he snarled. Moments later, horns echoed from the upper halls. War horns. Not Ashenvale's. Calen's expression darkened instantly. The outer packs. A wounded guard stumbled into the chamber entrance covered in ash and snow. Terror filled his eyes. "Your Majesty," he gasped, nearly collapsing. "The Northern Alphas have breached the gates. They say the throne has fallen." Another crash thundered overhead. The guard swallowed hard. "They demand the witch be surrendered." Elara closed her eyes briefly. Of course they did. Kingdoms always needed someone to blame before they admitted rot existed inside their own foundations. Kaelin stepped forward immediately, despite his injuries. "Seal the lower tunnels." The guard hesitated. "Sire, many soldiers are refusing orders." That struck harder than expected. Not because Kaelin feared rebellion, he had crushed rebellions before, but because he understood what it meant. The kingdom could feel weakness now. The throne had cracked. The castle itself screamed unrest through every wall and corridor. Wolves followed strength, certainty, dominance. And tonight, Ashenvale smelled like a dying crown. Vero smiled faintly through split lips. "Do you see?" he murmured. "This is what happens when forbidden blood awakens." "No," Kaelin growled. "This is what happens when truth finally surfaces." But even as he said it, doubt twisted inside him. Because the kingdom really was collapsing. The walls cracked. Packs rebelled. Ancient monsters woke beneath the throne. If he chose Elara publicly now, civil war would follow. Thousands could die. And worst of all, part of him still feared her. Not the girl herself. What she represented. The end of everything he had been raised to believe about kingship, blood, destiny. Elara saw the conflict in his eyes immediately. That hurt more than the chains ever had. Not because she expected devotion. She didn't. But for one fragile moment beneath the burial chamber, when he shielded her from Vero's blade and bled protecting her from the Hollow King, she had allowed herself to believe he saw her as something more than danger. Now, she remembered what crowns always chose first. Survival. The castle felt her pain instantly. Silver light dimmed around the chamber. The spirit wolves whined softly beneath the walls. Even Queen Liriana lowered her great head with sorrow. "Elara," the spirit queen whispered gently. But Elara stepped away from everyone. Away from the roots. Away from Kaelin. "I can stop this," she said quietly. The king frowned immediately. "Stop what?" "The kingdom dying." Vero laughed weakly. "You think the land will obey a servant girl?" Elara looked at him with calm devastation. "I think it already does." The chamber fell silent again, because everyone felt it. The roots beneath the floor pulsed in time with her heartbeat now. The walls breathed when she breathed. Even the spirit wolves watched her like guardians waiting for command. She belonged to Ashenvale more deeply than the throne itself, and that terrified everyone. Kaelin stepped toward her carefully. "What are you planning?" Her silver-gray eyes met his. There was affection there now. Dangerous affection she had never meant to feel. Because despite everything, despite the burial, despite the throne, he had still bled protecting her. He had still looked horrified when she was chained. But affection did not erase reality. "You said your wolf is dying," she whispered. "It's because the bond between the throne and the kingdom was broken centuries ago. And you can restore it? Maybe." The uncertainty in her voice frightened him more than confidence would have. "How?" Elara hesitated. Queen Liriana answered instead. "With blood." Kaelin's expression hardened instantly. "No." The Spirit Queen's silver eyes shifted toward him. "The kingdom was built through sacred bonds once. The land does not answer empty crowns." "What exactly are you saying?" The Hollow King growled softly beneath his chains. Sadness filled the sound. Elara swallowed hard. "The castle wants a queen again." Silence. Kaelin stared at her, as if the words themselves wounded him. Not because he did not understand, because he did, too well. If the kingdom accepted Elara publicly, the entire political order of Ashenvale would collapse overnight. Noble bloodlines would lose legitimacy. The councils would fall. Rival packs would revolt rather than kneel to a servant-born queen tied to forbidden magic. Choosing her could destroy the realm, but not choosing her might doom it anyway. The king realized then that this was the true test of rulers. Not war, not power, choice. And for the first time in his life, Kaelin did not know which choice made him a monster. Suddenly, a violent explosion shook the upper tunnels. Screams echoed downward. The northern alphas had entered the castle. The Hollow King bared his massive teeth. "They smell weakness," Kaelin looked upward sharply. Instinct took over immediately. Battle instinct, king instinct. He turned toward the remaining guards. Get the servants out through the eastern tunnels. Barricade the lower gates. Then he looked back at Elara. For one suspended heartbeat, neither spoke. The air between them burned with everything unsaid. Suspicion, fascination, anger, need, fear, and beneath it all, the terrifying beginning of trust. Then Kaelin did something no king of Ashenvale had done in centuries. He knelt before the oath-bound servant girl. Not fully, not yet. One knee touching broken stone while blood ran from his wounds and silver light flickered around them both. But every person in the burial chamber saw it. The king lowering himself before the girl they buried alive. Varo stared in horror. Elara's breath caught painfully. Kaelin looked up at her with storm-dark eyes. "Tell me how to save my kingdom," he said quietly. And above them, Ashenvale Castle began to howl. For a long moment, Elara could not breathe. The sight before her felt impossible. Kings did not kneel to servant girls. Not in Ashenvale, not in any kingdom ruled by wolves. Power flowed downward from crowns, from bloodlines, from fear. Men like Kaelin were raised from birth to command armies and break rebellions with their teeth. And yet there he was, one knee pressed against shattered stone, blood running from claw wounds across his ribs. Golden eyes lifted toward the girl his kingdom had chained and buried beneath the castle. "Tell me how to save my kingdom." The words struck the chamber harder than thunder. Even the spirit wolves fell silent. Varo looked physically ill. "Your Majesty," he whispered. "Stand up." Kaelin ignored him completely. Elara stared at the king in shock, and something far more dangerous than shock. Because beneath the fear, beneath the grief and confusion and centuries of old magic surrounding them, her heart betrayed her. Not because he knelt, because he meant it. She saw it in his face. The exhaustion, the desperation, the terrible loneliness of a ruler realizing the throne beneath him was built on bones. The castle breathed softly around them. Queen Liriana lowered her great silver head. "The kingdom sees," the spirit queen murmured. Kaelin's jaw tightened. "Then let it watch." Elara's chest ached unexpectedly. No one had ever chosen her over power before. Not openly. Not where others could witness it. But before she could answer him, screams erupted from the upper tunnels. Closer this time. Steel clashed against stone. Wolves roared through the lower halls. The northern alphas had reached the inner castle. One of the remaining guards stumbled toward Kaelin in terror. "Your Majesty, they've broken through the throne room. Lord Tiber leads them himself." Kaelin rose instantly. The softness, if it had ever truly existed, vanished from his face at once. He became king again in a single breath. Cold, dangerous, absolute. Tiber. The name carried pure hatred. Elara looked toward him sharply. "Who is he?" "A northern warlord," Varo answered bitterly before Kaelin could. "And the first wolf in the realm waiting for Ashenvale to weaken." The king's eyes darkened. "He challenged my father for the throne twice." "And lost?" Elara asked quietly. Kaelin's expression became lethal. "Barely." Another explosion shook the chamber overhead. Dust poured from the ceiling. Somewhere above them, nobles were still screaming. The Hollow King lifted his enormous head toward the tunnels. "More wolves come." Kaelin cursed under his breath. He turned toward Elara again. "Can the castle defend itself?" Before she could answer, the roots beneath the chamber pulsed once. Then silver light spread rapidly upward through the walls. Ashenvale answered for her. Far above them, the castle roared alive. Massive roots burst through corridor floors. Stone doors slammed shut on invading soldiers. Ancient statues awakened with glowing silver eyes. Throughout the fortress, the walls themselves began moving like living flesh around the northern invaders. Screams echoed through the halls. The castle was fighting back. But Elara felt the truth beneath the magic instantly. The roots were weak, sluggish, like a dying body forcing itself to stand one final time. "It won't last," she whispered. Kaelin heard her immediately. "Why?" "Because the bond is broken." Queen Liriana stepped forward slowly, spectral paws silent against shattered stone. "The throne and the kingdom were once one heartbeat," she explained. "When the queens fell, the bond rotted." "And now?" Kaelin asked. The Spirit Queen looked directly at Elara. "Now, the kingdom is trying to choose again." Silence settled over the chamber. Kaelin understood what she meant. So did everyone else. Ashenvale was not merely waking. It was deciding who deserved to rule it. And if it chose Elara publicly, war would consume the realm. The thought tightened around Kaelin's ribs harder than pain, because part of him already knew the answer the castle wanted. He felt it every time the roots moved toward her. Every time his wolf quieted near her voice. Every time the walls whispered her name like prayer, instead of fear. The kingdom recognized her. The kingdom rejected him. A brutal sound tore through the upper tunnel suddenly. Laughter. Deep. Male. Cruel. Then heavy footsteps echoed downward into the burial chamber. Lord Tiber entered Ashenvale, like a predator entering another wolf's den. He was enormous even in human form, broad-shouldered and scarred from decades of war. Thick furs draped across black armor stained with fresh blood. Snow clung to his dark beard. Behind him came northern warriors, carrying hooked axes and moonsteel spears. Several dragged wounded royal guards behind them like trophies. The moment Tiber saw the shattered chamber, his grin widened. "Well," he rumbled. The stories were true. His gaze shifted slowly toward Elara. Then the spirit wolves in the walls. Then the hollow king towering behind the roots. Interest sharpened instantly across his face. A buried queen. Kaelin stepped forward immediately despite his injuries. "You crossed my borders armed, and found your kingdom already collapsing." Tiber shrugged casually. Convenient timing. His eyes returned to Elara again. Elara hated the way he looked at her. Not with fascination like Kaelin, with calculation. Tiber saw opportunity. "Is this the little servant girl everyone's whispering about?" he asked softly. "The one making castles scream?" The northern wolves laughed darkly behind him. Kaelin's voice dropped dangerously. "Watch your tongue," Tiber smirked. "Careful, king. You're bleeding on your own floor." The insult hung sharply in the chamber. Northern alphas respected only visible strength. Kaelin wounded, and kneeling before a servant-born girl would spread through the realm like wildfire. Tiber understood exactly what he was seeing. A dying king, a fractured throne, and a woman powerful enough to change the balance of the kingdom itself, which meant every predator in the realm would want her. The realization hit Kaelin with savage force. Mine. The instinct exploded through his wolf before he could stop it. A growl ripped from his throat so violent the chamber walls shook. Several northern warriors instinctively stepped backward. Even Tiber's smile faded slightly. Elara stared at Kaelin in shock. The king froze too, because he realized exactly what had happened. The bond. Not complete, not understood, but awakening. And judging by the fear flashing across Vero's face, everyone else felt it too. Tiber's eyes narrowed slowly. Interesting. Kaelin forced himself under control, though the effort visibly hurt. "Leave Ashenvale." "No." Tiber folded his arms. "I think I'll stay." The northern lord looked directly at Elara. "You," he said. "Come with me willingly, and I'll spare the servants upstairs." The chamber went still. Elara's stomach turned cold. There it was. Not devotion. Not reverence. The same thing powerful men always offered women tied to dangerous magic. Ownership, disguised as protection. Kaelin took one slow step forward. "You do not speak to her," Tiber laughed. "And why not? She clearly isn't yours." The words landed like a knife, because neither Kaelin nor Elara had an answer. Not yet. The roots beneath the chamber twisted anxiously around Elara's feet. The castle itself seemed to recoil from Tiber's presence. Queen Liriana growled softly. He carries bloodlust into sacred halls. Tiber ignored the spirit queen entirely. His gaze remained fixed on Elara. You know what happens if northern packs decide you're a threat? He asked calmly. They'll burn this castle stone by stone to reach you. Elara believed him. That was the terrifying part. Because men had always feared women they could not control. And kingdoms feared them most of all. Kaelin suddenly moved. He crossed the distance between them in one brutal step and seized Tiber by the throat hard enough to slam the northern lord into the wall. You entered my kingdom, Kaelin snarled, eyes glowing wolf, gold, while my castle bleeds. You threatened my people, and now you dare speak of taking what stands under my protection. The burial chamber shook violently beneath his alpha power. Tiber grinned, despite being pinned against stone. There he is. Kaelin's claws dug deeper into the wall, beside Tiber's head. Leave. Or, the king's voice lowered into something terrifyingly calm. Or, I feed you to the beast beneath my throne. Behind them, the Hollow King slowly bared his enormous teeth. Tiber finally stopped smiling. For the first time since entering Ashenvale, uncertainty crossed his face. Then, Elara spoke softly into the silence. If you stay, she said, the castle will bury you too. Every eye turned toward her. Silver light curled around her body now, stronger than before. The walls whispered beneath her voice. The roots around the chamber floor pulsed in answer to her heartbeat. She no longer looked like a servant girl. She looked like something ancient, trying to remember its crown. And suddenly, even the northern wolves looked afraid. Tiber stared at her carefully for several long seconds. Then slowly, reluctantly, he pushed Kaelin's hand away from his throat. This kingdom is changing, he murmured. His eyes shifted once more between Elara and the king. And if the rumors are true, he smiled faintly, the realm will tear itself apart over the two of you. Then he turned and walked back toward the upper tunnels with his warriors following behind him. But just before disappearing into the darkness, Tiber looked over his shoulder one final time. At dawn, he said softly, every pack in the north will know a servant girl made the Alpha King kneel. Then he vanished. Silence swallowed the chamber again, and Kaelin realized with growing horror that Tiber was right. By morning, the kingdom would never be the same. After Tiber left, silence lingered through the burial chamber like smoke after fire. No one spoke immediately, because everyone understood what dawn would bring. Rumors traveled faster than armies in wolf kingdoms, faster than ravens, faster than truth. By sunrise, every pack in Ashenvale would hear some twisted version of the same story. The Alpha King's throne had cracked apart, spirit wolves walked the castle walls, and a servant-born girl, tied to forbidden blood, had made the king kneel before her beneath the royal court. Civil war would follow. Not eventually. Soon. The realization settled heavily over the chamber while silver roots pulsed beneath the stone floor like an anxious heartbeat. Above them, the castle still groaned around invading wolves and collapsing halls. But beneath the chaos, Elara felt something else now. Weakness. Ashenvale was tiring. The kingdom had awakened too quickly after centuries asleep beneath grief and chains. It was bleeding power through every cracked corridor and shattered tower. The roots defending the castle moved slower now. The spirit wolves flickered faintly at the edges. Even Queen Liriana's massive silver form seemed less solid than before. The kingdom could not sustain this much longer. Kaelin noticed Elara's expression immediately. What is it? She hesitated, then answered honestly. The castle is dying. The words struck the chamber harder than expected. One of the remaining guards quietly made a sign against death. Varro looked grimly satisfied, as if reality itself had finally proven his fears correct. But Kaelin only stared at Elara. You said it was waking. It was. She swallowed hard. Now it's burning itself alive trying to survive. Queen Liriana lowered her head sadly. The roots beneath Ashenvale have gone too long without a queen's bond. Kaelin's jaw tightened instantly. Then there must be another way. The Spirit Queen said nothing. That silence answered enough. Elara looked away from him because she could not bear the expression forming in his eyes. Hope mixed with fear. Fear mixed with something more dangerous now. Attachment. She never wanted him to look at her that way. Not because she disliked it. Because she did. And that frightened her more than the magic awakening beneath her skin. The castle pulsed softly beneath her feet. Memory drifted suddenly through her mind again. Not her own this time, but Ashenvale's. Ancient queens standing beside kings beneath moonlit trees. Wolves sleeping peacefully at their feet while the land bloomed around them. No chains, no fear, no councils whispering behind thrones. Balance. That was what the kingdom mourned. A ruler chosen not by conquest, but by bond. Kaelin interrupted her thoughts quietly. You know how to restore it, don't you? Elara's throat tightened, painfully. I know what the castle wants. And? She looked at him slowly. It wants the throne returned. Varro laughed bitterly from where Silver Root still pinned him against the wall. Listen to yourself. You would hand Ashenvale to a servant? Elara met his gaze calmly. Ashenvale was never yours to steal. The counselor's expression darkened. You think blood alone makes rulers? No. Her voice softened unexpectedly. Choice does. That answer silenced even Queen Liriana. Because it was true. The old queens had not ruled through fear. The kingdom chose them because they protected it, served it, loved it enough to suffer for it. Elara realized suddenly why the castle answered her. Not because she carried the bloodline, because despite everything Ashenvale had done to her, she still loved it. The servants, the kitchens, the snow-covered halls, the frightened children hiding during storms, the wounded guards too proud to ask healers for help, the old women mending cloaks by candlelight beneath the lower stairs. She loved the kingdom, even after it buried her alive. And the castle knew. Kaelin saw the realization hit her. His wolf stirred painfully inside his chest. You're thinking about sacrificing yourself, he said quietly. Elara looked away immediately. That was answer enough. No. The word cracked through the chamber like a command. Kaelin stepped toward her despite the blood still soaking through his torn clothes. Whatever this ritual is, whatever the castle demands, no. You don't understand. I understand enough. His voice lowered dangerously. I buried you once already. Silence fell. The raw regret in those words stunned everyone. Even Varro looked shaken. Kaelin's eyes remained locked on Elara's. I will not do it again. Something inside her heart broke open completely then. Not because he sounded like a king. Because he sounded like a man terrified of losing someone. The realization terrified her too. Before either could speak again, a horrible cry echoed through the tunnels above. Not a battle cry. A death scream. The Hollow King lifted his head sharply. The roots are failing. Instantly, the burial chamber shook harder than before. Several spirit wolves flickered and vanished entirely. Silver cracks spread rapidly across the walls. The castle was losing control. Then the heartbeat beneath Ashenvale faltered. One enormous pulse. Silence. Then another. Weak. Elara felt panic slam through her chest. No. The roots around her feet recoiled painfully, like wounded nerves. Queen Liriana's silver eyes widened in horror. The heart root is dying. Kaelin frowned sharply. What's the heart root? The living spirit beneath the kingdom, Elara whispered. If it dies, the castle answered for her. A deafening crack thundered through Ashenvale. Far above them, one of the royal towers collapsed entirely. Screams echoed through the mountain fortress. Wolves howled in terror throughout the kingdom. Snow exploded from the cliffs outside as part of the outer wall crumbled into the abyss below. Ashenvale was literally falling apart. The roots beneath the chamber twisted frantically around Elara's legs, now as if begging her not to leave. The feeling nearly shattered her. The kingdom was afraid, and somehow it trusted her to save it. Kaelin saw the terror in her eyes and stepped closer carefully. Tell me what the heart root needs. Elara hesitated, then whispered, a bond. Queen Liriana closed her eyes briefly. The old rulers shared blood willingly with the kingdom. The Spirit Queen explained softly. King and queen together, crown and land as one living vow. Kaelin understood instantly. A ritual, not political. Sacred, and judging by the tension flooding the chamber, incredibly dangerous. What happens if it fails? He asked quietly. The Hollow King answered this time. The kingdom devours you. Silence. Even Kaelin looked shaken by that. Elara wrapped trembling arms around herself. The bond hasn't been completed in centuries. No one knows if the heart root will accept us anymore. Oos. The word hung between them. Kaelin stared at her slowly. You already assume I'll do it with you. Elara met his gaze. Would you? The question stripped away everything else. The throne, the kingdom, the politics. Just truth remained. Would he tie himself to her publicly before the entire realm? Would he risk his crown, his bloodline, his control, for a girl buried alive as a servant? Kaelin looked at Elara for a long time, at the silver light beneath her skin, the exhaustion in her eyes, the grief she carried without bitterness, the impossible courage it took to stand here after everything done to her. Then he remembered the moment beneath the burial pit, the way the castle itself had mourned when she disappeared beneath the stone, and suddenly the answer felt terrifyingly simple. Yes. Elara stopped breathing. Kaelin stepped closer, until only inches separated them. If Ashenvale must choose, he said quietly, then let it choose while I stand beside you. The castle trembled. Not violently this time. Gently. Like relief. Queen Liriana bowed her massive silver head. Even the spirit wolves lowered themselves around the chamber walls. The kingdom had heard him. But before Elara could answer, Varro suddenly began laughing. Not bitterly. Desperately. You fools, he whispered. You truly think the realm will let this happen? Kaelin's expression hardened instantly. Enough. No, Your Majesty. You still don't understand. Varro's eyes gleamed with panic now. The council was never acting alone. The chamber stilled. Kaelin frowned. What are you talking about? Varro swallowed hard, then quietly said the words that changed everything. The Moon Temple ordered the queens destroyed. Silence crashed through the burial chamber. Even Queen Liriana recoiled slightly. Varro laughed weakly at their faces. You thought greedy nobles orchestrated all this alone? No. The priests feared queens tied directly to the living kingdom. A ruler chosen by the land could never be controlled by scripture. Elara felt cold spread through her body. The Moon Temple, the holiest power in Ashenvale. The place every wolf pack obeyed. And if they learned the true bloodline had awakened again, they'll come, she whispered. Varro smiled grimly. They already have. At that exact moment, bells rang throughout Ashenvale Castle. Not alarm bells. Temple bells. Slow, deep, sacred. The sound echoed across the mountains like judgment descending from the sky. Then, a priest's voice thundered through the castle halls above them. By order of the Moon Temple. The roots beneath the chamber recoiled violently in fear. The false queen beneath Ashenvale is condemned to death. The bells did not stop ringing. Their sound rolled through Ashenvale like funeral drums, deep enough to shake dust from the ceiling and silence even the spirit wolves beneath the walls. Every wolf in the kingdom knew those bells. Temple judgment. Final judgment. The Moon Temple rang them only when declaring holy execution. Elara felt the roots beneath her feet recoil in terror. Not from the priests themselves, from memory. The castle remembered these bells. It remembered queens dragged through sacred fire, while holy men called it mercy. Kaelin's face hardened instantly. How many? The wounded guard near the tunnel entrance swallowed hard. Temple soldiers entered the outer courtyard an hour ago. Thousands, sire. Thousands. Not priests. An army. Varro closed his eyes briefly against the wall. You should have killed her quickly. Kaelin turned toward him with murderous calm. Keep speaking, and I still might kill someone." The counselor fell silent. Another voice echoed from above, magically amplified through the castle halls. Female this time, cold and beautiful and utterly merciless. "Deliver the moon, cursed girl, peacefully," the voice declared, "and the temple will spare the kingdom further suffering." Elara's blood went cold. She knew that voice, not personally, but through the castle's memories. High Priestess Selene, the woman who ruled the Moon Temple itself. Queen Liriana's silver fur bristled violently. "She wears the same face." Elara looked sharply toward the Spirit Queen. "What? The bloodline of the first priestess who betrayed us." The realization struck everyone at once. This hatred was older than kingdoms, older than the councils. The Moon Temple had hunted the queens for centuries because women bonded directly to the land threatened the temple's control over divine authority itself. Kaelin's expression darkened further. "The temple marches an army into my capital without permission." Vero laughed bitterly. "And what will you do? Fight the gods?" The king looked toward the shattered ceiling above them where silver dust still drifted through broken stone. "No," he said quietly. "Just the people pretending to speak for them." The chamber fell silent again, because that was the most dangerous thing anyone in Ashenvale could say. The temple crowned kings, blessed wars, declared bloodlines sacred. Entire packs would slaughter themselves before openly defying priestesses. And now Kaelin stood one choice away from turning the realm against him completely. Elara saw it clearly in his eyes. The calculation, not cold, desperate. If he protected her now, he would lose more than his throne. He would lose legitimacy itself. Wolves would call him cursed, faithless, mad. His allies would abandon him. Packs already circling Ashenvale's weakness would rise openly against him. All because of her. The thought hollowed her chest. Quietly, she stepped backward. The roots immediately tightened around her ankles like pleading hands. Kaelin noticed at once. "What are you doing?" Elara forced herself not to look directly at him. "Ending this." "No." The word came instantly, violently. She lifted her eyes finally. "If I surrender to the temple, they'll kill you. They'll kill thousands if I don't." The king crossed the chamber in seconds until he stood directly before her again. Injured, bleeding, furious. "And you think sacrificing yourself fixes this? It fixes the war." "No," Kaelin growled. "It feeds it." The intensity in his voice stunned her, because he sounded genuinely angry at the idea of losing her. Not strategically. Personally. The realization made her heart ache in dangerous ways. Above them, the temple bells rang again. Then, screams followed. One of the northern towers collapsed entirely. The shockwave thundered through the lower chambers hard enough to throw several guards off balance. The heart root beneath the castle pulsed weakly afterward, like a dying heartbeat. Elara felt panic immediately. The castle doesn't have much time. Queen Liriana moved beside her slowly. "Neither do you." The Spirit Queen's silver eyes shifted toward Kaelin. "The temple will not stop until her bloodline is erased again." Kaelin's jaw clenched. "Then they'll have to go through me." The words echoed through the burial chamber with terrifying certainty. Not political, not calculated, instinctive. Mine. Elara saw the realization hit him a second too late. The mate bond was awakening faster now beneath all the chaos and danger. She felt it too every time he stood near her. A sharp pull beneath her ribs. A warmth, answering the cold loneliness she had carried all her life. But this was no blessing. If the kingdom discovered their bond before the throne ritual succeeded, every pack in the realm would declare her a manipulative witch corrupting the king through forbidden magic. The temple would use it as proof she must die. As if summoned by the thought itself, sacred fire suddenly exploded through the upper tunnels. The guards cried out in alarm. Temple soldiers. Silver-armored wolves flooded into the lower corridors carrying moonfire lanterns and sacred spears glowing with anti-magic runes. Their white cloaks were stained with snow and blood. At their center walked a woman dressed entirely in pale silver robes. High Priestess Selene. She descended into the burial chamber slowly, untouched by dust or fear, despite the collapsing castle around her. Her beauty was sharp enough to wound white blonde hair braided with silver chains, pale eyes glowing faintly beneath moonfire symbols carved into her skin. She looked less like a woman, and more like a blade forged into human form. Every remaining guard lowered their gaze instantly. Even Varro bowed his head. Only Kaelin remained standing upright before Elara. Selene noticed immediately. "So the rumors were true," she said softly. Her gaze slid toward Elara with calm disgust. "You let the old blood touch you." Kaelin's voice dropped dangerously. "You entered my castle armed." The priestess smiled faintly. "Your castle?" The words cut deeper than expected. Because the throne had already cracked. Everyone here knew it. Selene stepped farther into the chamber, temple soldiers spreading behind her like silver wolves surrounding prey. But when the spirit wolves along the walls growled at her, something flickered briefly beneath her calm expression. Fear. Interesting. The high priestess turned toward Queen Liriana slowly. Still haunting kingdoms after death, the spirit queen bared spectral teeth. Still murdering women in the name of purity. The air sharpened instantly. Selene ignored the insult. Her attention returned to Elara. "You should not exist," she said simply. Elara forced herself to hold the woman's gaze, despite the cold pressure flooding the chamber. "Neither should lies." Several temple soldiers growled low in warning, but Selene only tilted her head slightly, studying Elara with unsettling fascination. "Do you know what your bloodline did to this realm?" "Yes." Elara's voice remained steady. "It loved it." For the first time, something ugly flashed across the priestess's face. Hatred. Not political hatred. Personal. Ancient. The queens enslaved kings through blood bond magic. No. Queen Liriana thundered through the walls. "We stopped priests from becoming kings themselves." The burial chamber shook violently. Selene's calm mask finally cracked. Silence. Moonfire exploded outward from her staff, flooding the chamber with sacred light. Spirit wolves snarled in pain. The silver roots recoiled violently. Even Elara staggered as burning agony ripped through the magic beneath her skin. Kaelin caught her before she fell. The moment he touched her, his eyes flashed gold, and every wolf in the chamber felt it. The bond. Temple soldiers froze. Selene went completely still. Slowly. Painfully slowly. Her gaze lowered toward the king's hand, gripping Elara's waist protectively. Then she smiled. Not kindly. Triumphantly. "Oh," the priestess whispered. "How convenient." Kaelin realized too late what she intended. Selene raised her voice so the entire chamber could hear. "The Alpha King has been corrupted by forbidden mating magic." Temple soldiers immediately slammed their spears against stone in ritual judgment. "The moon-cursed girl has bound the crown through blood seduction." "No!" Kaelin roared. But the damage was already done. The soldiers had smelled it. The growing mate bond. And in wolf kingdoms, truth mattered less than what people believed about power. Selene's pale eyes gleamed. "You see now why she must die." Kaelin stepped in front of Elara fully. "You will not touch her." The priestess's expression sharpened. "You would choose a cursed servant over the gods?" The king's wolf surged violently beneath his skin. Then he answered with terrifying calm. "I would choose truth over cowards wearing holy robes." The chamber exploded into chaos. Temple soldiers roared in outrage. Spears lowered instantly toward the king himself. Sacred fire erupted across the burial chamber, while spirit wolves howled through the walls. The Hollow King lunged against his chains with a roar powerful enough to split stone. And standing at the center of it all, Elara realized the final line had just been crossed. There would be no peace after this. No hiding. No returning to servant halls and quiet shadows. Because the Alpha King had just chosen her publicly before the temple itself, and Ashenvale would either crown them together or burn for it. The burial chamber became a battlefield in a single heartbeat. Temple soldiers surged forward through silver fire, while spirit wolves exploded from the walls like storms given teeth. Sacred spears shattered against ancient roots. Priests screamed prayers into the chaos as the castle itself roared beneath them. And at the center of it all stood Elara and Kaelin back to back. The Alpha King's sword flashed through moonfire smoke, while black claws tore from his fingertips mid-strike. Blood soaked the torn fabric around his ribs, but he fought like a wolf, protecting the last living thing worth dying for. Because now, there was no hiding the truth. Not from the temple, not from the kingdom, not from himself. Mine. The bond slammed through his chest with savage certainty every time someone moved toward Elara. His wolf no longer fought it. The beast welcomed it, craved it. Terrifying, beautiful, fatal. Selene watched the growing bond with cold fury from behind her soldiers. "Kill the girl," she commanded. "The king can still be cleansed afterward." Elara felt Kaelin's rage instantly. The burial chamber shook violently as his alpha power exploded outward. Several temple soldiers collapsed to one knee, choking beneath the force of it. "She is not yours to judge," Kaelin snarled. Selene's pale eyes sharpened. "And yet you kneel for her already." The accusation struck harder because it was true. Kaelin hat knelt. And worse, he would do it again. The realization frightened him less than losing her now did. A sacred spear suddenly cut through the smoke toward Elara's throat. Kaelin intercepted it instantly, snapping the weapon in half with brutal force, before driving the attacker into the stone wall hard enough to crack bone. But there were too many soldiers. The temple had come prepared for war. Moonfire lanterns flooded the chamber with suppressing magic that weakened the spirit wolves and burned the silver roots retreating across the floor. Even Queen Liriana's enormous spectral form flickered unevenly now beneath the holy flames. The temple was poisoning the castle itself. Elara felt Ashenvale screaming beneath her feet. Bine. Fear. The heart root was dying faster now. She dropped suddenly to one knee, gasping. Silver light burst violently beneath her skin. The roots around the chamber twisted toward her in panic. Kaelin turned instantly. "Elara!" She barely heard him. The castle was showing her something. Not memories this time. A path. Deep beneath the burial chamber. Beneath the roots. Beneath even the Hollow King's prison. The heart root. And she understood immediately what the kingdom wanted. Not death. Union. The bond ritual had never been about sacrifice. It was about choice, freely given. King and queen. Crown and kingdom. Two souls binding themselves willingly to the land, so neither power nor grief could rule alone again. The realization hit her so hard, tears filled her eyes. The old queens had never enslaved kings. They had loved them enough to share the burden of the realm itself. "Elara." Kaelin's voice cut through the chaos as he crouched beside her. Blood covered his hands. His eyes burned gold beneath the flickering moonfire. "What's wrong?" She looked at him, trembling. "I know how to stop this." The king's expression tightened immediately. "And what does it cost?" "Everything," she almost said. But that was not entirely true. It would cost truth. Vulnerability. Trust. Things kings and servant girls alike were taught never to give. Before she could answer, Selene raised her staff high above the battlefield. Sacred symbols ignited across the chamber walls. "The false queen will die now," the priestess declared. Moonfire erupted downward from the ceiling like divine lightning. The attack struck directly toward Elara. Kaelin moved without hesitation. He threw himself in front of her. The moonfire hit him full force. His scream tore through the burial chamber like something dying. The sacred flames exploded across his body, burning straight through flesh into soul. Wolves collapsed throughout the chamber from the force of it. Even spirit wolves recoiled in agony. "Elara." His voice broke as he fell hard against the shattered floor. The smell of burning wolf magic filled the air instantly. Something inside Elara snapped. Not softly this time. Violently. The castle answered her grief. Every root beneath Ashenvale awakened at once. Silver light exploded through the entire kingdom. The burial chamber shattered apart as ancient magic flooded upward through every wall and corridor. Temple soldiers screamed as roots burst from the floor beneath them. Spirit wolves surged through moonfire flames. With renewed fury, the Hollow King roared so loudly the mountain itself shook. And Elara rose. The silver light surrounding her had changed now. It no longer flickered uncertainly. It blazed. Her torn servant dress whipped around her in storm winds, pouring from the heart root beneath the castle. Ancient runes ignited across her skin. The walls whispered her name not with fear anymore, but devotion. Queen Liriana stared in awe. The kingdom chose. Celine's calm composure finally broke. No. Elara lifted her eyes slowly toward the high priestess. Silver gray no longer. Moonlit silver. Ancient. Terribly. You buried queens beneath this castle, Elara said softly. The roots growled beneath the chamber. You chained wolves beneath the throne. Spirit wolves emerged fully from the walls now, dozens surrounding her like an army reborn from legend. You called love corruption, because control was easier than trust. Celine stepped backward for the first time, and suddenly every person in the chamber understood something horrifying. The servant girl was gone. Ashenvale had crowned its queen. The temple soldiers faltered instinctively. Wolves lowered their heads without meaning to. The kingdom itself recognized her now, not because she demanded obedience, because the land answered her breath. Elara turned toward Kalen immediately. He lay motionless beneath the fading moonfire, blood spreading across broken stone. His wolf flickered weakly beneath his skin like a dying flame. Fear slammed through her, harder than awakening ever had. Kaelon. She fell beside him instantly, gathering his head into her lap. The moment she touched him, silver roots curled around them both protectively. His eyes opened barely. Still gold. Still him. You should have run, he rasped painfully. Elara laughed through tears. You first. Something weak but genuine touched his mouth. Then pain twisted through him again. The moonfire was killing him. Sacred temple magic burned wolves from the inside out. No healer could survive it. Celine saw the realization, hit Elara, and smiled coldly, despite the chaos around her. Even queens cannot save dying kings. The words echoed sharply through the chamber. Elara looked down at Kalen's face. At the man who buried her because he feared losing his kingdom, then chose her anyway when it mattered most. And suddenly the answer became clear. Choice. That had always been the true power beneath Ashenvale. Not blood. Not crowns. Love freely given. Elara pressed trembling fingers against Kalen's chest, directly over his dying wolf bond. Then she lowered her forehead against his. I choose you, she whispered. The heart root answered. Silver light erupted through the burial chamber, brighter than sunrise. Ancient runes spread beneath Elara and Kalen in widening circles across the shattered floor. The roots beneath Ashenvale wrapped around them both like living vows. The bond ritual had begun. Every wolf in the kingdom cried out at once. Kalen gasped violently as the magic flooded through him. Pain tore across his body while silver fire burned away, the moonfire poisoning his blood. His wolf surged upward, roaring beneath his skin, not dying anymore. Transforming. Elara felt it too. His fear, his rage, his loneliness. The crushing burden of a king, raised to believe love, made rulers weak. And he felt her in return. The years of silence, the humiliation, the endless loneliness of being invisible until the kingdom itself finally screamed her name. Their souls collided beneath the heart root. Not domination. Understanding. The chamber exploded outward in a storm of silver light. Temple soldiers fell back, shielding their eyes. Spirit wolves howled triumphantly through the collapsing castle. Even Celine staggered backward in horror, because above Elara and Kaelon, a crown of living silver roots slowly formed in the air. The crown of Ashenvale, the true crown, and for the first time in centuries, the kingdom bowed willingly. Every wolf in Ashenvale felt the bond complete, not through sight, through instinct. Across frozen forests and mountain villages, wolves suddenly dropped to their knees beneath the moonlight without understanding why. Warriors halted mid-battle. Children woke from sleep crying. Ancient pack elders stared toward the capital with horror and awe, as silver light burst upward from Ashenvale Castle like a second moon rising beneath the mountains. The kingdom had chosen, and kingdoms did not choose lightly. Inside the burial chamber, the crown of living roots hovered above Elara and Kaelin, while silver fire swirled around them in violent waves. Ancient runes spread across the shattered floor like veins beneath skin. The castle itself pulsed with each beat of their joined hearts. The bond was complete, not master and servant, not king and possession. Equal. The realization struck the temple harder than any weapon could have. Selene stared at the living crown with naked fury twisting across her face. "Impossible," she whispered. Queen Liriana's spirit wolf stepped forward proudly. "The kingdom remembers its rulers." The high priestess raised her staff again immediately. "Then we burn the memory from it." Temple soldiers obeyed at once, despite their fear. Sacred spears lowered toward the throne chamber while moonfire spread through the burial vault like poisonous sunlight. But this time the castle answered differently. Not defensively, furiously. The walls split open. Ancient spirit wolves poured from the stone itself in silver storms, slamming into temple soldiers hard enough to send bodies crashing across the chamber. Roots erupted beneath sacred lanterns and crushed them into ash. The castle no longer fought like a wounded beast. It fought like a kingdom reclaiming its crown. Selene screamed commands over the chaos. "Kill the queen!" Elara heard the title clearly this time. Queen. The word should have frightened her. Instead, it hurt, because she still remembered scrubbing blood from banquet floors, while nobles stepped over her like dirt. She remembered sleeping beside kitchen ovens during winter, because servants were denied enough firewood. She remembered her mother vanishing into the lower tunnels, while everyone pretended not to notice. And now the same kingdom that buried her alive called her queen. The irony almost shattered her heart. Kaelin rose slowly beside her despite the fading blood on his skin. The bond had healed the moonfire wounds, but something deeper had changed too. His wolf no longer felt fractured beneath his ribs. The constant agony poisoning him for years had vanished completely. For the first time since inheriting the throne, Ashenvale recognized him, not because of his bloodline, because of his choice. He looked toward Elara and felt the bond answer instantly. Warmth, trust, fierce protective instinct tangled with something infinitely more dangerous now. Devotion. The realization stunned him. He had spent his life believing kingship required distance, control, ruthlessness. Yet standing beside Elara beneath the living crown felt more powerful than any conquest he had ever won. Selena saw it too, and hatred sharpened into desperation. "You've doomed this realm," the priestess hissed. "The outer packs will never kneel to a servant queen." Kaelin stepped forward slowly, black wolf power rolling through the chamber. "Then they can challenge us openly, instead of hiding behind temples." The words struck the room like war drums. Temple soldiers hesitated, because despite everything, despite the collapsing castle and spirit wolves and forbidden magic, the Alpha King sounded more certain now than he ever had before. Dangerously certain. Selene noticed the hesitation among her soldiers instantly. Fear flashed across her face. Not fear of Elara's magic. Fear of losing authority. For centuries, the temple controlled Ashenvale through fear of cursed bloodlines and divine judgment. But now the kingdom itself stood alive before them, choosing its rulers openly without priestly permission. If word spread beyond these walls, the temple's power would fracture forever. So Selene made her final choice. "If the kingdom chooses corruption," she whispered coldly, "then the kingdom dies with it." She drove her staff into the stone floor. The runes along the burial chamber walls immediately shifted blood red. Queen Liriana's expression changed instantly. Horror flooded the spirit queen's silver eyes. "No," the high priestess smiled. "You should have stayed buried." Then the entire castle screamed. Not metaphorically. A sound of agony thundered through Ashenvale as hidden runes ignited beneath the mountain itself. Ancient temple seals buried centuries ago, awakened all at once beneath the roots of the kingdom. The execution ritual. Not for queens, for Ashenvale itself. Massive cracks exploded across the burial chamber floor. The heart root beneath the kingdom convulsed violently as black fire spread through the silver roots like poison flooding veins. Spirit wolves cried out in pain throughout the walls. Selene had prepared a final purge. If the queens ever returned, the temple would destroy the entire castle rather than let the old bloodline rise again. "You mad woman," Kaelin growled. "The gods demand purity." "No," Elara whispered. "You demand obedience." The chamber collapsed further around them. Stone pillars shattered. Temple soldiers fled in terror as entire sections of the lower vault began falling into darkness below. The heart root was dying again. Faster this time. And if it died fully, the mountain itself would collapse. Ashenvale and everyone inside it would be buried forever. Kaelin immediately grabbed Elara's arm. "How do we stop it?" She looked toward the roots beneath the chamber desperately. The kingdom answered her panic with flashes of memory. Ancient queens standing at the heart root itself deep beneath the castle. Sacred vows spoken in blood and soul. Wolves kneeling beneath moonlight, while kings stood beside their queens willingly. Then she saw the final truth. The kingdom could not heal, while the Hollow King remained chained. The ancient beast beneath Ashenvale was part of the bond itself. The king tied to the land through love and grief. As long as he remained imprisoned in madness, the heart root would continue poisoning itself. "Elara," Kaelin pressed urgently. She looked toward the Hollow King. The massive creature still fought temple soldiers through the collapsing chamber, black chains tearing through roots and stone alike. Yet beneath the rage, sorrow still burned in his ruined silver eye. "He has to be freed," she whispered. Queen Liriana stiffened immediately. "If his chains break fully, he'll either heal," Elara swallowed hard, "or destroy everything." The Spirit Queen closed her eyes painfully. Kaelin looked between them. "That's not a comforting plan." Elara gave a weak laugh despite the chaos. "I know." Another explosion rocked the burial chamber. Black fire spread farther through the roots. The heart root's pulse weakened again. There was no time left. Kaelin turned toward her fully. "Tell me what you need." Elara stared at him for one suspended heartbeat. Not because of the question itself, because no one had ever asked her that before. Servants were ordered, used, sacrificed, not trusted. But Kaelin stood before her now, not as a king commanding obedience, but as a man choosing partnership. The bond warmed painfully between them. "I can break the chains," she whispered. "But if he loses himself completely," Kaelin understood immediately. "You need someone strong enough to stop him." "Yes." The king's mouth curved slightly despite the destruction around them. "Good thing I'm difficult to kill." Elara almost smiled. Almost. Then Selene screamed another command above the chaos. Temple soldiers retreated suddenly toward the upper tunnels. Not fleeing, smiling. Kaelin's instincts sharpened instantly. "What are they doing?" Too late. The priestess slammed her palm against one final rune carved into the wall, and beneath Ashenvale Castle, the execution seals awakened completely. Black fire erupted through the heart root. The entire mountain began collapsing. The mountain began to die beneath them. Not slowly, not like rotting kingdoms or fading bloodlines. Violently. Ashenvale shook with such force that entire sections of the burial chamber collapsed into darkness below. Spirit wolves screamed through the walls as black fire devoured the heart root beneath the castle. Towers shattered overhead. Snow and stone thundered down the mountainside outside while the kingdom split apart from its poisoned center. The temple had chosen annihilation over surrender, and for one terrible moment, Elara understood the true depth of their fear. They would rather bury an entire kingdom than allow women like her to rise again. The realization filled her not with rage, but grief, because Ashenvale deserved better than rulers driven by terror. A deafening crack tore through the chamber floor. The heart root was exposed now far beneath the ruins, a massive silver tree pulsing weakly in the darkness below the castle. Black fire spread across its roots like disease crawling through veins, and wrapped around its trunk lay the Hollow King's chains.